Hey, macro folks, it's Mr. Hooker one more time, and now we are on video number 2 of international trade. Let's roll. Here we are. So, supply and demand model. Think about it. If you go international, you got a ton more consumers. If you are on the supply side, this means you need to make more stuff. If you are a buyer, you can buy more things from more places. Me, I'm a travel guy. I like to go places. I like to see things outside of where I am. I have lived all over this country except the Northwest. People say it's beautiful, just never been there. Um, but I've lived all over, traveled all over the world, love it. Some places I'd even like to, some people, some of these places I'd even be willing to live. Some of these places, yep, I'll never live there. Nice to have been there, but I ain't never living there. Um, but that's the way we're gonna do it. So the supply and demand model, let's look at the effect of the imports, the effect of the exports on domestic producers. Let's take a look at this. Everything changes your life. Everything is economics, folks. So we've got domestic demand, domestic supply, and a world price. So understand the world price is everybody all at once throwing their stuff into the ring. That's the world price. Now, what you sell it for in your country may be higher or lower than the world price. If what you sell it for is higher than the world price, then basically you are going to start bringing stuff in. You're going to import goods at the world price, which is lower, and that will lower your domestic price. If what you sell it for domestically is lower than the world price, then your producers will sell at the higher world price on the world market. So either way, whether you are higher or lower than the world price, you benefit, somebody in your country benefits from international trade, right? So let's work with this. So the domestic demand curve shows how the quantity of a good demanded by domestic consumers depends on the price. And domestic supply shows how the quantity of goods supplied by domestic producers depends on the price. Everything does. So here we go. We got domestic supply, domestic demand. There's our equilibrium price and quantity for domestic. Consumer surplus is demand. The demand curve, that price, or that willingness to pay down to price. Producer surplus is supply up to price. So here we go. Autarky price is that domestic price. World price, we're going to say, is lower. So if the world price is lower, as I just mentioned just a few seconds ago, world price is lower, then basically what you're going to look to do is import from the world at the world price and sell in your country. Okay? Because at the world price, and you can see it here, quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied at the world price. Okay? So the domestic quantity demand, so they're showing you here the domestic quantity demanded with trade is out there, and the domestic quantity supplied with trade is there. So you have a shortage at the world price. So that's a whole thing that you got to deal with. So when the economy's open to international trade, imports enter the domestic market and the domestic price falls from the autarky price, P sub A, to the world price, P sub W. As the price falls, domestic quantity demanded rises from Q sub A to Q sub D. Domestic quantity supplied falls from QA to QS. Okay? And all of that is filled with imports. So as we fall, let's get that down there. So as we fall there, as a result of international trade, consumers gain additional surplus. That's areas X and Z. Let's get that there. There we go. That's areas X. Z's not in there yet. There we go. That's areas X and Z. So those go to the consumers. Okay. And producers lose surplus. That's area X. So producers lost X. All right. Because the gains to consumers outweigh the losses to producers, increase the total surplus in the economy as a whole, and that is area Z. All right. So that's a win for the economy. So we're up. All right. With exports, world price is above the autarky price. Now we're going to be selling on the market. Domestic quantity with trade, supply is greater than demand at this point. When the economy's open to international trade, some of the domestic supply is now exported. Domestic price rises from the autarky price to the world price. When this price goes up, domestic quantity demanded falls from QA to QD. Oops, my bad. Portion of production is not consumed domestically, is just exported. It ain't no big deal. Oops, my bad again. My finger wants to jump. So when the domestic price rises, producers gain the additional surplus. That's X and Z there. Okay. But consumers lose the surplus, and that's area X. The gains to producers outweigh the losses to consumers. There's an increase in the total surplus to the economy as a whole, and that is area Z. So once again, the economy wins. So once again, it is a good thing. So either way, it is a good thing. Going up or down, it's good. Now, going down it's better for consumers. Going up, it's better for producers. So it kind of matters which one you are as to who it's better for, but that's it. So practice question 2, imports are bad for a country because they harm both domestic consumers and domestic producers. They don't hurt both. So yeah, they're gonna hurt one side, but they're not gonna hurt everybody. And 3, suppose the accompanying graph represents the U.S. supply and demand for corn. The world price of corn is $5 a bushel, then it's above. All right. Equilibrium price is 4. 5 is greater than 4. So that means we're not importing it. We are exporting it. All right. That is a cool video to watch. Population growth with IKEA boxes. It is Hans Rosling, who has passed away. And he's passed away for more than 10, well, almost 10 years now. But he was an expert on growth, on economic growth and trade, and how trade led to growth. So it's kind of interesting how that works. So his IKEA box one is really good. Another one he has that's really good is 200 countries, 200 years, 200 countries in 4 minutes. That was the one that shot him to superstardom. He has a whole website called Gapminder and all that stuff. Um, International trade and the wages. So people talk about this a whole lot, and I brought a guy in from, I don't even remember where he was from now, Malaysia, I think. He was a Fulbright scholar at a college down the road from where I was teaching at the time. Talked to my students about that and said, like, don't even feel bad about the people that are working for what y'all consider low wages. If you paid them U.S. wages, they'd live better than the president at their, in their country. So producers and consumers are not the only ones affected by trade. It affects the owners. So what we have is the Heckscher-Ohlin model. So countries tend to export goods that are intensive in factors that are abundant in that country, import goods that are intensive in factors that are scarce in that country. So trade increases the demand for factors that are abundant and decreases the demand for factors that are scarce. So prices of abundant factors tend to rise and prices of scarce factors tend to fall. So U.S. exports are human capital intensive, high-tech designs, for example, and U.S. imports are unskilled labor intensive, clothing, in that sense. So trade raises wages of highly educated American workers and reduces wages of unskilled workers. So pretty much how that works. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the reasons you are in college. Um, the effects of trade protection. So ever since Ricardo explained comparative advantage, economists have advocated for free trade, in which the government policy should not attempt to either reduce or to increase the level of exports and imports that occur naturally. Um, so anything that limits imports or trade protection, or sometimes just called protection. The two most common protection policies are tariffs and import quotas. So let's start with tariffs. These things have been massive in the news. Um, so any good economic policy has some tariffs in it. There's a tariff called a revenue tariff, um, and that's the one where, like, hey, we don't make, we make the good, or excuse me, we don't make the good. We want you to keep sending it, but we're going to put a little bit of a tariff on it just to take a little off the top, right? We're going to take a little money off the top. There's that. It's not very much. You're only taking a little bit of money, and your goal is to have them keep sending it. You're not going to charge so much that they quit sending the good. All right. So tariff it's just a tax levied on imports. You and I, the domestic consumer or the domestic business, pay the tax. It depends on the elasticity of the product. So that's a micro thing, but basically, depending on who needs who needs this product the most, whether the seller needs to sell it really bad or we need the product really bad, one of us pays that tariff. Two effects. One, it increases domestic production, reduction in domestic consumption. So goods now produced by a higher cost country. And two, less is consumed, so we get less gains from trade. What are can we measure the wasted resources? We're economists, we do a lot of math. So yeah, we can. It happens. So let's look at it. Tariff pushes up the price, which reduces the quantity demanded, increases domestic uh, quantity supplied. So here we go. We go from world price to the tariff price. Bam, there you go. Um, we have moved it up. So reduces consumer surplus, increases producer surplus, does create new government revenue, creates deadweight loss. Areas B and D are the deadweight loss, so the two sides. C, not so much. D shows that there's some mutually beneficial trades go unexploited, and B shows that tariffs cause some of the economy's resources to just be wasted. So that's basically what happened with all of that. So B and D are our wasted money, our government, our deadweight loss. So that's us. Quotas. It's just a legal limit on the quantity of a good that can be imported. The effect's same as a tariff, except instead of the government revenue, quota rents go to the license holders, which are usually the foreigners. Um, Interesting one on that one. In 2018, Trump imposed high tariffs on imported washing machines. His statements implied he believed foreign exporters, not the U.S. citizens, would pay the tariffs, same as he did when he did these things here in 25. Same belief. But some foreign manufacturers relocated production to the U.S. Overall employment in the industry rose. However, the tariffs cost consumers about 1.5 billion and only 1,800 new jobs were created. So that's about 800,000 per job. And trust me, that's not how much these cats were getting paid. So the tariffs were reduced in February of 2019, but not eliminated. And that is where we're going to stop. Video 3 will start with the arguments for